Hello, my name is Amanda Mara Rizzotto, and I will be presenting a performance guide to two songs by Brazilian composer Francisco Miani. I wanted to start with the question, why study Brazilian classical repertoire? Why is that relevant? The art song performance canon is expanding as we see singers performing art songs from diverse countries such as Norway, Sweden, Czech Republic, Russia, and diverse dialects from Catalonia, Argentina, Cuba, among others. There is a plethora of Brazilian art song repertoire generally unknown in the United States. Brazil, being the largest country in South America by territory and population, is known for its musical diversity reflecting several cultures such as African, European, and Amerindian. I believe it is important to explore other countries compared to those we traditionally study music from, such as the United States, France, England, Italy, Spain, and Germany, and discover the beauty and richness of cultures from other countries. So this presentation will be exploring two vocal pieces by Francisco Miani. He is considered one of the greatest Brazilian composers, and his large body of vocal work is acclaimed for expressing varying Brazilian musical style. Additionally, I will analyze and provide performance practice guidelines for the selected pieces, showing how Brazilian national identity is expressed through the text and music chosen. So Francisco Miani was a pianist, flutist, conductor, and composer who began his musical studies with his father, the Italian immigrant Alfredo Miani, professor of flute in the Conservatório Dramático e Musical de São Paulo. From a young age, he also composed dances and songs using a pseudonym, Chico Barorá. At that time, the classical music and the popular music didn't mix, which is why he used a different name to compose more popular style music. At the age of 19, he graduated from the Conservatório Dramático de Música de São Paulo, which is Dramatic Conservatory of Music of São Paulo, in flute, piano, and composition. His debut concert was at the Teatro Municipal in September of 1918, where he performed some of his work. That led him to a very successful beginning of the career, which in 1920 helped him gain a scholarship from the Comissão do Pensionato Artístico de São Paulo to continue his studies in Milan, Italy. His compositional style can be divided into three phases. The first one under Italian influence in the 1920s when he went to Milan. He still composed based on Brazilian themes and poems, but the European influence, and especially Italian influence, was clear. The second phase is his nationalist phase. It's full of influence from his friend Mário de Andrade, who he studied with, and is marked by his engagement on the movement. His third and final phase began in the 1960s, when he distanced himself from the nationalist movement and began to create his works based on free experimentation, for which he made use of the diversity of compositional processes, aiming at a universal speech, but without giving up Brazilian characteristics. The purpose of this research is to find pieces that either by text or music express parts of Brazilian spirit and culture. The first piece I chose was No Meio do Caminho, which means in the middle of the way. I chose this piece because this is one of the most famous poems in Brazilian literature. Every Brazilian studies that poem at school. For this piece, I will first give a background on the poem and the poet, and then I will give the performance practice. The poet, Carlos Drummond de Andrade, is a reference for Brazilian modernism. You can use his poems in parallel with history, because his poems were published in parallel with important events in literary and social history starting in 1922. Each of his main volumes correspond to a particular moment in the history and evolution of literary principles and moral concepts. Brazil at his time was ready for simplicity and directness of expression, for snapshots of the real Brazil, for tireless exercises of self-criticism, for repudiation of the past and the poetry of the common man. So once published, the poem In the Middle of the Way was deeply criticized for its simplicity and repetition. Over time, the verses were understood by the public and critics. Currently, the poem is a kind of postcard of Carlos Drummond de Andrade. So the poem is, in the middle of the way there was a stone. There was a stone in the middle of the way. There was a stone. In the middle of the way there was a stone. I will never forget this event in my life of my self-fatigue redness. I will never forget that in the middle of the way there was a stone. There was a stone in the middle of the way. Francisco di Mignoni gives a lot of freedom in the music for the singer to decide the nuances of the poem. But I thought it was also important to discuss what Carlos Drummond de Andrade thought about the poem. So he said, the aforementioned stone, I will be quite frank, has no meaning except what the people who attack it and are irritated by it give it. It's a simple poor stone, like so many out there. There's nothing more. The poem, if it can be called that, in which it appears does not intend to expose any facts of a moral, psychological, or philosophical nature. It only wants to say what it is written on it, namely, that there was a stone in the middle of the way, and that this circumstance remained etched in my memory. As you can see, it's very little, it's almost nothing, but that's what there is. In the first section of the song, the score does not direct you into thinking in big phrases, but rather thinking in individual pitches. On measure 3, Mignoni marks philosophizing, while expressing monotony in the music by making a repetitive melody, almost as if the person is just realizing that there was a stone in their way. So it's no meio do caminho tinha uma pedra, tinha uma pedra. So it's very repetitive and just like the thought processing. However, it grows into a more lyrical phrase in the measure 8, on nunca me esquecerei, which shows that because a person is dwelling so much on the fact that there was a stone in the middle of the way, they shall not forget it. Another point to observe is that up until this point, the time signature was stable, having 12/8 in the vocal line and 4/4 in the piano line. However, on measure 8, the vocal and the piano lines are finally in the same time signature. The person formed the thought. But the time signature goes through a moment of instability, which it changes 2/4 to 3/8 to 2/4. So it's the person realizing, I will never forget this event in the life of my eyes, my so tired eyes. So all that change in stability supports the idea that the person is out of the monotonous state and really considering the meaning of the stone. So the way Francisco Miani wrote, it brings a deeper meaning to the stone in the middle of the way than how Drummond de Andrade just sees as it's a simple stone. When the music comes back to the tempo primo marking, you can see that there are marks for the big phrasing. It's not anymore no meio do caminho tinha uma pedras. No meio do caminho tinha uma pedra. Tinha uma pedra no meio do caminho. So the singer now has an opinion about the stone. It can be that the stone was just a stone, or that they observed that the stone was a metaphor for struggles in life. And the time signature also stabilizes 4/4 for both the singer and the piano, which is different from before. The second piece I chose is called Paragon. It's a song by an anonymous author. Paragon is actually a street cry. It's a musical practice that inhabits the urban space. It's how it's used by sellers advertising his products in an attempt to catch the attention of people walking by. The interesting thing is that pregões is that they have little works written about it, even though they are an oral tradition. And in Brazil, thanks to the chronicle such as Luiz Edmundo, you could find records about these urban voices. And when you look at his chronicles, you can actually analyze the social, economic, and cultural aspects of the population of Rio de Janeiro at the beginning of the 20th century. So they are very important. We just don't really value them necessarily. So the text is very simple. It's just hot pino people. It's hot brunette. Oh, it's burning hot. Which the brunette, it's a way of like them calling attention and trying to pay a compliment to a potential client. The accompaniment, as you can see, is constant since the beginning. So the piano part has one compass, and the symbols, it just means it repeats. So that music will repeat for 22 bars, which is basically half of the song. The piano seems to represent the constant noise in the street that is present when the vendor is advertising the hot pie. In the first section of the song, the vocal line has long and slow phrases, for example on measure 3 and 4. The line is full of syncopations and triplets, as you can see also on the image on measure 5 and 6. It would be because the vendor needs to be constantly changing the vocal lines to get potential customers. That is why the vendor is also referring to people when saying gente and morena, which is people and brunette. The interesting challenge to this song is to find ways of repeating the same text as if it was a new thought, a new idea, without allowing the music to get tedious. The second section started on measure 23, that's slide on slide, with the piano doing that music, which the voice after repeats, and it keeps going. It's basically the same melody, which the vendor is just saying very fast, oi, que está quente, que está quente, que está quente de queimar, oi, que está quente, que está quente, que está quente de queimar, and the piano also changes. So it's also another way of trying to break through the noise in the street for people to be like, what is he saying, and actually pay attention. It's very interesting, and you see that when you walk in the streets of Rio de Janeiro. That's exactly what they do. They have big, long phrases, and then suddenly they go very fast to be very dynamic. So the end of the song, when you approach the end of the song, on measures 30 to 33, the vocal line has the word oi, together with the accent with the word gritando, which is crying and yelling. The composer throughout this piece gave both the vocal line and the piano lines very specific dynamic and rhythmic markings. The singer's two challenges will be first to bring the street quiet character to the piece, especially in the first slow section, that it's very lyric, and to the second section that is very vocal and free-mannered to maintain the integrity of the vocal instrument, and to sing with a very clear diction. And at the end is just a clamor to like hi. That's basically oi is the word for hi, but it's also a way of calling people's attention. So the conclusion is these two songs are a few examples of the rich culture found in learning musical works from other countries besides the standard repertoire. Both songs are very different from each other, but each of them bring aspects of the Brazilian people and things they deal with every day. So thank you so much for listening to my presentation, and have a wonderful day.